Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for joining today's webinar. I wanted to start just by introducing myself. My name is Megan Braverman, Principal with Burbay Marketing and Public Relations. We work with law firms and other professional services businesses to increase visibility that fuels revenue growth. So I attended this year's annual Marketing Partner Forum, and I'll be giving cliff notes from the conference. It's a 3-day conference, so it covered a lot of ground, and this webinar will do the same. And just a heads up, although MPF is geared toward larger law firms, much can be applied to small law firms as well as a range of professional services firms. So just a quick reminder that you can submit questions throughout the webinar via the questions box. I'll leave about 5 minutes at the end for questions. And thanks again for joining. Okay, so I want to begin by describing the general theme of the conference, which is adaptation, the idea of evolving or facing extinction. Our world and competitive landscape is metamorphosing at a rapid pace. We have changed the way we market, the way we do business, the way we bring value to clients, how we stand out from the competition, the way we bill, everything. So law firms really have to contend with shrinking revenue streams due to sophisticated clients with increasingly complicated problems. We really have no choice but to continue innovating and identifying new ideas and ways to reshape what we've always done. So how do we provide real value to clients? How do we differentiate ourselves? Our firms really depend on coming up with answers to these questions and constantly rethinking them all the time. As one panelist said it perfectly, here are the last 7 words before a firm dies. That's the way we've always done it. And I cannot count how many times I have heard that one, and it gets worse every time I hear it. We've all heard of the many companies that didn't adapt or evolve and soon became extinct. We've witnessed the slow demise of companies like Blockbuster, the once booming video rental company, or Kodak, who invented the first digital camera in 1975 but did nothing with it in fear it would cannibalize their business. Or MySpace, very profitable at first, but only focused on connecting people on a single level, where Facebook was figuring the recipe for long-term success. Last bad example, Xerox. They invented about everything back in the day, a computer mouse, the Ethernet, but the board of directors thought that they were wasting time with these quote-unquote breakthroughs. So now that you know who didn't innovate, the one person who did adapt is Kobayashi. So he is the greatest competitor eater of all time. He's 128 pounds and can wolf down 50 hot dogs and buns in 12 minutes. How? He innovated. He revolutionized professional eating with his Solomon method, which is now copied by the rest of the competitive eating industry. He basically splits hot dogs and buns in half so that he can consume one half on one side of his mouth and the other half on the other side. He's basically created a conveyor belt method in his mouth. So maybe we can't relate to Kobayashi, but in one of the sessions given by Gabriel Tenenbaum on innovation in the changing market, he outlined a few firms we can relate to. So I'm going to start with Reed Smith. They've actually set aside space to innovate. They have what they call innovation hubs in London and New York, which is basically focused on process improvement, new legal services, etc. So basically each Friday from 3 to 4, they have guided discussions on ways to innovate. It's a wonderful example of a firm empowering their employees and giving them an avenue to innovate. Another example is a firm in Texas called Kamara & Sibley. They were having issues with e-discovery vendors and decided to create their own e-discovery solution, which is called CS Disco. They innovated by finding alternative streams of revenue. But even more awesome is that it was born out of the firm's frustration with conventional e-discovery tools that were slow and difficult for people to use. So instead of being forced to use whatever technology was in place, they reinvented it. Today, CS Disco is the fastest growing e-discovery solution in North America. The last example is Littler Mendelsohn. In a world that's increasingly driven by data, Littler leveraged this theory of big data to their advantage. So spearheaded by the firm's global director of data analytics, they started using big data to predict and track a range of items related to labor and employment. Since Littler works with many employers, they actually decide to sell this data as a separate service line. And the goal was to use it to make better decisions for their clients and reduce the risk of costly legal disputes. So this theory of innovating and adapting is becoming so critical, especially for law firms, because profit margins with law firms continue to be stagnant. As you can see from the graph on the slide, the demand for law firm services, which was presented in Marketing Partner Forum survey conducted by Thomson Reuters, it really brought to question how law firms can sustain and survive in the long term. And the answer is that they can't in the traditional sense. Firms need to adapt to the changing market, like Littler and the other examples I gave, so that they're not the next Blockbuster or Xerox. The survey by Thomson Reuters also painted a picture on the marketing and business development functions at firms, and I'm going to use BD a lot for business development. So this slide shows that marketing and BD budgets have increased, but is not predicted to increase much more in 2017. And I actually wanted to point out an interesting statistic at the bottom, which says that 2.5% is the average percentage of a firm's gross revenue spent on marketing and business development. Outside of the legal industry, it's around 9 to 10% of the firm's gross revenue. This is a pretty big discrepancy, indicating law firms are still far behind other industries and are not truly adapting their budgets either. So the next graph shows that lawyer engagement remains to be the biggest challenge for marketing and BD professionals, next to lack of resources. One of the big reasons lawyers lack motivation or involvement in marketing is not being able to see tangible results quickly. Marketing and BD professionals and lawyers who are marketing mavens not only need to equip attorneys with the tools to market effectively, but motivate and encourage them to actually do this, even when it's difficult to see progress. Not to mention the shortage of time attorneys have. So through regular education, coaching, and communication, marketing and BD professionals need to really focus on winning small victories of change. And this is what one panelist said at MPF. Don't try to change a person entirely. Win them over with these small incremental victories. So the next statistic continues to flabbergast me. Every time, year after year, we are still seeing that the majority of law firms don't track or measure marketing or BD return on investment. So this graph is basically showing you that 74% of firms do not track. And by the way, last year at MPF, it was 76%. So 2% of firms decided not to measure marketing anymore. I've presented hour-long webinars on the importance of measuring marketing, yet few firms are seeing the benefit of doing such. Measuring the return on investment of each one of your marketing dollars will not only help you better understand the effectiveness of a particular campaign, but you'll have better information. You'll have the numbers to basically help you determine what your marketing budget should be, and you'll be able to forecast how many new clients you might be able to generate each month and each year. And it's really insightful information. So along with this, the next slide, which again, this is all from Thomson Reuters survey that was presented at MPF, it shows marketing and BD activities and its share of the budget along with perceived effectiveness. The rub is that you can't always see the effectiveness or value of some activities. There will always be an intangible aspect of marketing. For example, visibility or reinforced branding. Those things sometimes are difficult to track. The shocking stat here is the top one, which basically says 18% of the budget is spent on sponsorships, yet only 26% deem it effective. Law firms are almost spending half of that on existing client visits, yet find it 74% very effective. If we actually tracked return on investment better or at all, firms can be spending their dollars on more effective marketing tools. So now that we've got a peek at the state of the market with the backdrop of this idea of evolving, I want to now share the discussion throughout the conference which came from many esteemed general counsel on how to win new business, how to bolster existing client relationships and really stand out from the crowd. So one of the very first sessions called the perfect pitch and the very last breakout session called client collaboration They all discussed how to win new business, which every attorney is clamoring to figure out. So how do you get invited to pitch new business? And this is really the magic question. So if you don't already have an established relationship, getting the opportunity can prove challenging in an oversaturated market. So I'm going to go through a couple of the highlights that General Counsel said is a great way to get someone's foot in the door, and I'm going to use the word GC a lot, which is General Counsel. So one great opportunity is to be introduced through someone that has a relationship with the GC, and this may seem obvious to most people, but GCs are constantly talking to each other and other trusted resources. Anytime you can get a relevant introduction, that's one of the best ways to get in front of a new GC that might not know you. Some GCs said if they're actually close with their outside lawyers, they don't mind you asking for introductions to other GCs that they know. If you impress them with your work, they're going to want to help you too. But the key word is trusted, because not all introductions are alike. So you want to make sure that that GC really trusts that person who's making the introduction. So if you don't know anyone that can make an introduction, which is oftentimes the case, there are several other ways to get your name in front of them. Many GCs talked about the value of very targeted and tailored newsletters, and the big but, is that they have to be timely. Speed is everything to them. So if it's a new regulation or upcoming legislation that might affect them, you have to be the first or the second in their inbox, or it really doesn't matter. Another important aspect is that your newsletter has to be consumable. And I think that's the beauty of Twitter and why it's so successful, because it's so incredibly easy to digest. GCs are very crunched for time, so they need digest, not a legal thesis. And several GCs at the conference actually commented that they've hired lawyers after getting timely and tailored newsletters from them. The other thing that GCs commented on is that they really enjoy webinars and in-house CLE presentations on timely topics. At the end of the day, these all work. And I actually had someone call me shortly after this webinar invite went out who inquired about our services. So it certainly does work. But in general, GCs like relevant presentations related to the issues that they're facing, very similar to the newsletters. Almost all of the GCs commented that they loved getting offers for attorneys to come in and present to them and their staff. They find it incredibly valuable, and they love free advice. Also, don't be afraid to ask what they want to hear in a presentation. Once you get that opportunity, I think it's something that folks really need to be doing more of. Ask what's important for them and what their staff wants to hear, so that you can deliver the best presentation that these people have been seeking. A lot of the audience asked about schmoozing. So the GCs basically said that schmoozing is always an aspect of nurturing the relationship, with the key word nurture. Entertainment and going out only cements the relationship that is already there. The panelists actually said that there's nothing more awkward than a sales lunch when no one has anything to say. So in general, GCs like the schmoozing aspect, but they don't feel an obligation to use a lawyer just because they take them out all the time. At the end of the day, they want a smart, great lawyer. But schmoozing is always something that helps you really cement the relationship. By and large, GCs feel that they're always trying to be sold, which is really the case. What stands out to them the most is when outside attorneys come to them with something besides selling. For example, offering them to attend a relevant event or speak at a conference. If you have a relationship with the attorney, consider how you can bring them opportunities. I mean, this is opportunities for revenue or business opportunities. Understand where they make their money and help them make more of it. You know, do a cost analysis or identify opportunities in their contracts. Because at the end of the day, there is no magic bullet, and it really requires a combination of these tactics that I just discussed. You know, send an advisory, present a CLE to their team, get coffee, then do another webinar, then take them out to lunch. Essentially nurture the relationship. So when you finally get the opportunity, panelists shared their best pitch experiences or meetings with potential lawyers. And I'm going to run through a series of questions that were asked of GCs at the conference. So what is the weight of an actual pitch book? So a lot of in-house lawyers prepare these pretty detailed pitch books for GCs when they're headed into a pitch meeting. So in general, the GCs commented that less is more. It should be highly targeted and tailored, just like your newsletters, just like your CLE presentations. They ask that you please don't include the last 10 years of matters that you worked on. Select a handful of recent representative transactions or matters. They also don't want to see a list of all the services your firm has to offer. You know, they want it really focused to them and the problems that they're facing. So if it's services that are relevant to their problems, great, but they don't want to know everything. And GCs will actually, I found this very interesting. GCs sometimes look at your LinkedIn and your website to see if the pitch book is the same or if you made up a new practice for them. And they also really stress they don't want generic information about that they're an outstanding lawyer who has unparalleled skills. They want impactful information, essentially not fluff. So instead of telling them how great of a lawyer you are, do a tremendous amount of research on them. I mean, again, I can't tell you how many times the GCs were talking about focusing on them, not you. Find out what mutual connections you might have with them. See where they used to work. Scour their website for more information. They know when you've done their homework, and it impresses them. So the last thing is, you know, most GCs had talked about that they prefer to have the pitch book ahead of time because they use it as a tool to create discussion and ask questions in the meeting. Which I thought was interesting because I'm not sure that a lot of attorneys do this ahead of time to actually send it. And then there was some discussion about creative pitches or RFPs. They basically set, like, for example, using visual elements or infographics. That's what I mean by creative. GCs said that anything that advances the explanation is helpful, but to know your audience. Some are visual thinkers while others are not. So take a look at the company that you're pitching. If they're really forward-thinking and visual thinkers, that's something you might want to consider. So by and large, the GCs on all the panels explained that the best pitch experience that they had were with those that listened. And I don't think that lawyers are fully trained in this discipline. When lawyers are truly listening, they will find out more about the company and the GC. For example, one of the GCs was talking about that they were being pitched by two separate law firms. One of the firms really listened, got a better understanding of how the firm litigates, was able to match up their expertise with that litigation style, and they won the business. The other firm came in describing step 1 and step 2 of this litigation process when the firm and the GC were already in step 5. So lawyers need to take themselves out of the equation. That's what really makes for a fruitful pitch is less talk about you and more getting to know them. What I thought was also very interesting is how many outside lawyers aren't talking with the GCs in more detail before the actual pitch meeting. They said that they rarely get calls asking them what they need specifically to make it for a more meaningful pitch. In the panel called Strategic Approaches to Selling, they talked about the fact that no one asked them, what does success look like to you? I found this to be very interesting because how can you create a great pitch when you don't know what success means to them? And I think that the legal service industry and others haven't really caught up to asking these questions. They want to be asked questions that get them thinking too. That's what truly makes an impression. So moving on to a big question. So I'm going to continue to run through a series of questions about what matters to general counsel. One was, does cost matter? So they basically said that price is certainly one factor, but not all. It also depends on the matter. For example, if it's a bet the company case or a major transaction, they want to hire a great lawyer regardless of the price. 2, if it's not an area they know, price becomes less of a factor. Almost always, GCs have a range in mind, so if your estimate is off the charts, they want to know why. One thing that they all agreed about is that it's less about cost and more about accurate forecasting around the cost. So they talked about visibility on cost is extremely important. They don't want to be surprised. Their job is protecting their business leaders. And if the business leaders are surprised, it reflects poorly on the GCs. One GC gave an example where he fired a lawyer because of that. He was an incredible lawyer, but a terrible forecaster. Forecasting and cost visibility was discussed in length during a legal project management session, which explained the importance of detailing scope of work and developing budgets. The ability to be a great forecaster comes with the ability to manage projects, which is not a new idea for law firms. The panel on legal project management explains that clients don't always know exactly what they're buying and what's within the scope. You may think they do, but in fact they don't. Forecasting and invoicing are all ways to communicate your strategy and scope in a financial way. We can talk about legal project management for an hour on its own. So in short, that concept leads to the things that clients want and need, and it really becomes a pleasure working with the people that are great at charting scope and value. So the next question is the impact and use of technology when deciding to hire outside legal counsel. GCs often don't understand what you're saying and how it's applicable to them. I think we can all relate to that when we're talking about new technology. It can also scare them off entirely because if they're under the impression it's just another thing they have to manage, they don't want it. What they want to know more is how it's going to make their lives easier. If that's technology, then great, but don't make it another thing that they have to manage. The next question was about how GCs feel about interacting with business development and marketing folks within the law firms. I thought this was interesting. Without question, the panelists said that having a relationship with BD folks is still very much a new idea for them. They believe it's an interesting concept and could prove helpful. Some of them even said there are times when they wish they were speaking with a non-lawyer. For example, if they have a relationship with the firm and want to identify who would be the best attorney to talk with, the BD person could have a better ability to match referral questions exactly. With that said, they still want to know the people that are performing the work, the lawyers themselves. And let's see, so the last question was on whether firm culture matters to GCs. Most of the panelists said that they're hiring the lawyer, not the firm, but they do want to see a law firm with a culture of high quality that has a very collaborative spirit. They like seeing attorneys working together across a wide range of practice areas to help them solve their increasingly complex problems. That's why the theme at the conference of getting law firms to evolve was tied so heavily into the other big theme, which is collaboration. Collaboration is becoming more vital to lawyers than any other professional service firm, which leads me to discuss one of the keynote sessions with Dr. Heidi Gardner on barriers to collaboration and the realities of rainmakers. So this session focused on why collaboration is so imperative to law firms and how you can provide the value clients are seeking. So she opened up the discussion about that there are two trends crashing together, specialization and VUCA. So specialization is your increasingly deep, narrow expertise, and this has really become the way of the world. And I'll come back to VUCA in a second, but I want to jump to another Thomson Reuters survey finding. So in this slide, you're going to see that 53% of firms cite their competitive advantage as specialization or expertise. So a lot of firms are using specialization to differentiate themselves from competitors. Okay, so going back to this specialization and VUCA. So VUCA, apparently this word was introduced by the U.S. Army War College to describe the threat landscape. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's not a bad description of the threats facing our clients. And Heidi was talking about that it's all about the integration of specialized expertise to solve VUCA problems. So on this slide, you're going to see some of the top-ranked VUCA concerns. We've all heard many of these in the last few years. Regulatory and compliance is one. These are changing so fast they can't keep up. Cybersecurity, globalization, corruption, Trump, digitalization, and much more. Your clients want you to come in and address these issues, not, hey, you have this problem, and now I'm going to tell you my narrow specialization focus so you can figure it out. If partners and attorneys are not having conversations about these VUCA problems, that's an issue. You're missing an opportunity to unearth problems that they face. Now, this is where collaboration comes in because it's collaborating to solve VUCA problems. So as Heidi said in her presentation, let's get a few things out of the way. Collaboration is not hugging your partners and attorneys like, good job. It's not delegating to associates. That's just delegation. And it's not passing the baton. So as you can see, I haven't used the word cross-selling in this webinar, which is a much more popular phrase in collaboration. Although cross-selling is the buzzword, Heidi asked us to actually all stop using cross-selling because, frankly, your clients don't want to be cross-sold. She explained that cross-selling is the professional equivalent of do you want fries with that? So, do clients actually care about collaboration? As said by multiple GC panelists throughout the conference, yes, yes, yes. Clients care very much about this. They want access to the best knowledge and experts in your firm. The more of a deep understanding you have of your client's business and their sector, the better you get to know them and solve their problems. They also want to decomplexify. Clients care about simplifying their vendor base. Fewer vendors for operational simplicity. At the end of the day, collaboration is better for everyone. For the law firms listening or for those marketing BD people listening, would you rather seek more clients who don't know you or expand the work with existing clients? I presume the latter, and really every practice is better off this way. Clients who use law firms for one-off cases, it's easy to find other law firms to do the same or to start a bidding war. When you have client teams, it's very difficult to replicate, which actually brings me back to another startling statistic from the Thomson Reuters survey, which is saying that 45% of law firms do not plan to implement client teams. I think this is startling because as the world starts to shift to client teams, it's still showing that law firms don't plan on implementing them at all. Times have been changing for law firms for a long time now, and they need to be less afraid of collaborating together. Collaboration not only becomes necessary in this highly complex world, but it makes you and your firm irreplaceable. So, bottom line, it's very hard to get your partners and attorneys to collaborate together. And I'm sure all of the marketing and BD professionals and leaders of firms listening know how hard this is. There are many barriers to overcome. For example, partners need to get over the fear of I don't know everything, and that's a tough one. In fact, one GC panelist mentioned that the best experience he had with a lawyer is when that lawyer admitted he didn't know that area very well and referred him to another law firm. And they said that they've been working with them for many, many years now, the referral and him. The other fear is the fear of losing the client. A lot of attorneys feel like if they hand off their client to another attorney, they're going to lose their client. A lot of attorneys are not aware of other attorneys' expertise within the firm. They may not trust others with their clients. And lastly, this is a big one, is they don't even hear the opportunity present itself. They might not even hear that the GC mentioned a problem that would be a good fit for another attorney within the firm. So during Heidi's presentation, she gave an example of nearly two identical professionals. They have the same practice, they've been with the firm the same amount of time, they graduated at the same time, and they even bill the same number of hours annually. So as you can see from this picture, Twin 1 is really a bottleneck, and all the collaboration exists through him, whereas Twin 2, the collaboration extends far beyond him. I mean, just look at the lines around Twin 2, a ton of touch points. Team 2 is going to be very difficult for a client to replace. Team 1, there's probably many law firms out there that can do the same. And when they did this survey, they tied it to business performance, and the business performance of Twin 2 is 4 times that of Twin 1. This is the kind of information I think attorneys need to see to illustrate that collaboration is imperative. And then I want to talk really quickly about the importance of being irreplaceable. So this graph, basically it surveyed 300 clients in major accounting firms. So with a solo partner, only 28% of clients would remain with the firm if that lead partner left the firm or retired or something like that. Whereas if there are multiple partners on the account, 90% would remain with the firm. So I think this is a very interesting statistic, and it shows you that when you collaborate, you do become irreplaceable. So how do you get over these barriers? So here are some of the ideas that were shared by panelists throughout the conference, including some breakout sessions discussing overcoming these barriers. So one thing that was mentioned, and it's usually the first thing that's always mentioned, is compensation, such as shared origination credit. What's interesting about this is that it stirred up a lot of mixed opinions. For example, I mean, lawyers, like many people, are motivated financially. It's not the only thing. But there was a lot of pushback on paying lawyers like salespeople. And I have to say that this is sort of one of the first times at a conference that I saw a lot of pushback on compensation. For example, Butler Snow, a law firm, has no origination credit. They are not compensated for work at all, for new work, excuse me. They are evaluated on a number of factors, and business development is number 16 on their list. So origination credit can sometimes be counterproductive when everyone's fighting over the credit. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. Law firms need to look at other ways to encourage collaboration besides compensation, which I'm going to talk about now. So one idea is that the more work that you're doing for a client, the more you can understand and help them. You know, to understand the nature of your client's problems, attorneys really must reach beyond their area of expertise to better understand how the client's business works and to create an integrated and workable solution. The other part is management. Management has a big part in collaboration. If management reinforces positive behavior and compensates people for that positive behavior, I think you'll start to see attorneys collaborating more. For example, you need to make examples of the people who have done really well collaborating. You can send out a firm-wide announcement on the success of that collaboration. You can compensate those attorneys for successfully collaborating together, not just the attorney who originated the business. So you're really compensating them for collaboration, not origination. Some of the law firms have even talked about open office spaces, which is, yes, open office spaces. I know that's an interesting concept for lawyers, but one firm in the breakout session has open office spaces, and it's actually working really well for them. Burbay, for example, we use open office spaces for better collaboration. When you tear down the walls, you'd be very surprised what can come from it. The other aspect, the firm's leaders really need to empower the attorneys to work together, such as collaborating on a CLE presentation or maybe attending an event together. You know, these are baby steps to working on matters. And I think if you start with those little baby steps, they'll get to know each other better, they'll be able to spend time together and then potentially work on a matter together. Maybe those attorneys co-author an article. So basically find activities for lawyers to start working together. Lastly, is to find what challenges and issues your client face and then leverage the marketing department to put research together. When you begin to create these client teams from the outset, when you just are hired by a firm, I think that's really, you start to get people in that mentality to do it from day one versus do it at month 30. Of course, collaboration, like many things, it takes investment to get going, and there's a huge discrepancy between the investment and the payback period. I mean, it can be very daunting, and it seems like there's a lot of barriers to overcome, but when you start having small victories, these victories and benefits accrue over a long period of time to something much larger. And the whole goal is to shift from selling to helping. So to conclude, I just want to share a couple takeaways because I know we covered a lot of ground. One is to encourage attorneys and leaders to promote the idea of collaboration in order to serve clients with the highest and best value we can. The other is to advocate for better marketing and BD spending decisions, which also includes encouraging the firm to track ROI, to track their activities. The other point is to better train your attorneys to listen and ask insightful questions versus spending all the time on figuring out how to sell themselves. And in the end, it's about innovating, it's about evolving and adapting and winning those small victories. Because again, you can't, Rome wasn't built in a day. Try small steps and you can get to something much larger. I hope that you were able to take some pearls of wisdom away. I have some time for questions, so just so everybody knows, I will have a copy of the PowerPoint and the recording for everybody. So whoever is interested, I'm happy to send it to you, and we'll also be posting it online. And please feel free to reach out to me. One thing I want to let you know about is our next webinar with Lee and Judith from Organic Communication on stop blocking and start connecting and how to enhance your interpersonal communication. So thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. And please reach out to me with any questions. Here's my contact information. And I hope you enjoyed.